The warning lights flashed red across the control panel as Marcus Thompson fought to keep his scout ship steady. The small vessel shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of planet NK-427, its hull groaning under the strain. He had done this landing procedure 100 times before, but never with a damaged stabilizer and failing power core. "Come on, hold together," he muttered, his trained hands moving quickly over the controls. The ship's computer displayed a countdown. 2 minutes until total power failure. Marcus knew he had one shot at this. If he missed the relatively flat area he'd spotted, he'd end up as another piece of space debris scattered across this alien world. Through the cockpit window, he could see the planet's surface rushing up to meet him. The world below was a mix of dense purple forests and rocky outcrops, all shrouded in a constant twilight caused by the planet's 3 moons. The atmosphere readings showed it was breathable, which was the only good news he'd had since the meteor shower had damaged his ship. The hull temperature was reaching critical levels. Sweat dripped down Marcus's face as he wrestled with the controls, trying to slow his descent. His Earth Force training kicked in, muscle memory taking over as he performed emergency landing procedures. The ground was getting closer by the second. 1 minute until power failure. Marcus spotted his landing zone, a clearing in the strange forest that looked just big enough for his ship. He adjusted his trajectory, using the last bits of power in his maneuvering thrusters. The ship's frame rattled so hard he could barely read the instruments. 30 seconds. The clearing was right below him now. Marcus pulled up the nose of the ship, trying to bleed off speed. Trees whipped past on either side, their purple leaves creating a blur of color. The ship's belly scraped the top of one, sending a shower of sparks into the alien sky. 10 seconds. "This is going to hurt," Marcus said through gritted teeth. He braced himself as the ship hit the ground. The impact threw him against his restraints, knocking the wind from his lungs. The vessel skidded across the clearing, carving a deep trench in the soil. Metal screamed against rock as the ship finally ground to a halt, mere meters from the tree line. Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the soft hiss of ruptured hydraulic lines. Marcus hung in his restraints, taking stock of his injuries. Nothing felt broken. The crash webbing had done its job. He released the buckles and dropped to what was now the floor of his tilted ship. Emergency training told him he needed to move fast. A crashed ship could attract predators on any world, and he had no idea what kind of creatures called NK-427 home. The emergency kit was right where it should be. Marcus grabbed the survival pack and checked its contents: water purifier, emergency rations, basic medical supplies, and most importantly, his ranger's knife and pistol. The emergency beacon was damaged in the crash, its housing cracked. He might be able to repair it, but that would have to wait. Right now, he needed to get out and assess his situation. The main door was jammed, but the emergency hatch above his head worked perfectly. Marcus pulled himself up and out of the ship, getting his first real look at his new surroundings. The air was thick and humid, carrying strange, sweet smells he'd never encountered before. The purple forest loomed around the clearing, its trees towering at least 100 meters into the sky. Something that sounded like a cross between a bird call and a whale song echoed in the distance. As Marcus slid down the side of his ship to the ground, he noticed large tracks in the soil near the forest edge. Whatever had made them was bigger than an earth elephant. He checked his pistol, making sure it was loaded and ready. "Well," he said to himself, "time to see what kind of welcome party this world has planned." Marcus spent 3 days setting up his survival camp in the shadow of his crashed ship. He'd already learned 2 important things about planet NK-427. The nights were dangerous, and something big was always watching. He sat by his small fire, carefully constructed to produce minimal smoke. The remains of his dinner, a creature that looked like a mix between a rabbit and a lizard, cooled on a flat stone. He had tested it with his survival kit's poison detector before eating, a basic precaution on any alien world. A crack of breaking branches echoed from the forest. Marcus immediately dropped the bone he was cleaning and grabbed his pistol. The sound had come from something much larger than the small creatures he'd encountered so far. The purple leaves rustled, and Marcus saw them. 3 tall figures emerging from the forest. They stood at least 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in natural armor plates that looked like polished stone. Their 4-fingered hands held strange weapons, and their faces had multiple eyes that reflected the firelight. Marcus kept his pistol ready but didn't point it directly at them. First contact situations were always tricky, and he'd been trained for this. The alien stopped at the edge of his camp, clearly surprised to see him. "Well," Marcus said calmly, "I guess I'm not alone anymore." The tallest alien stepped forward, its armor plates shifting with a sound like clicking stones. It touched something on its chest, and a small device hummed to life. "You are alive," it said in a deep, mechanically translated voice. "This is unexpected." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'm alive. And you're the first friendly faces I've seen since I crashed. I'm Marcus Thompson, Earth Force Ranger." The aliens looked at each other, their multiple eyes blinking in patterns. "You survive here, in the death zones, alone." The translator made their disbelief clear. "Death zones?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady. The tall alien gestured at the forest around them. "These lands are forbidden, too dangerous. Only the strongest hunting parties dare to enter, and many do not return. Yet you make fire, you hunt, you live." For the first time, Marcus noticed the quality of their weapons and equipment. This wasn't a primitive species. Their technology looked far more advanced than Earth's. Yet they spoke of the forest with fear. "I'm a survivor. It's what humans do," Marcus explained. "And you are." "We are the Grix. I am lead guardian Redstone." The alien touched its chest plates. "You must come with us. The council must know of this. The lone creature, surviving in the death zones. Impossible." Marcus considered his options. His emergency beacon was still broken, and these Grix clearly had advanced technology. But there was something else, the way they kept looking over their shoulders, the tight grip on their weapons. These aliens were afraid of their own world. "Your city," Marcus asked, "is it far?" "Half-day's walk. We have protective barriers, safe paths." Redstone looked at the darkening sky. "Night comes, not safe here. Stalkers hunt in darkness." As if to emphasize the point, a deep roar echoed through the forest, closer than any Marcus had heard before. The Grix raised their weapons, forming a defensive circle. "Agreed," Marcus said, quickly gathering his survival pack. "Lead the way." As they moved through the forest, Marcus noticed how the Grix jumped at every sound, how their weapons wavered at every shadow. These beings had technology that put Earth to shame, yet they moved like prey animals in their own world. Marcus walked differently. 3 days in these forests had taught him its rhythms. He moved like a predator, eyes scanning, feet silent. He noticed the Grix watching him with their multiple eyes, studying his movements. "You walk strange," Redstone said finally, "like the hunters of this world." Marcus smiled slightly. "On Earth, we were hunters long before we were builders. Sounds like we have a lot to teach each other." The Grix city rose like a mountain of metal and crystal before Marcus. Massive energy shields hummed overhead, creating a dome that kept the dangers of NK-427 at bay. Guards with advanced weapons stood at every level, their armor more elaborate than the rescue parties. Marcus stood before the Grix Council, 7 tall figures seated on curved stone chairs. Their chamber was at the heart of the city, walls lined with screens showing various parts of the death zones. He noticed one screen tracking a massive shape moving through the purple forests, something even bigger than he'd imagined. "Impossible," said the head council member, "White crystal. No one survives alone in the death zones. Our best hunting parties need at least 20 warriors, and even then, we lose many." Marcus stood straight, hands relaxed at his sides. With respect, I did survive. Humans are adaptable. We've been surviving hostile environments since before we had technology. The council members clicked their stone-like armor plates, a sound Marcus had learned meant disagreement or disbelief. Words mean nothing, said another council member. Blue River. The death zones take the strongest warriors. Just last moon cycle, we lost an entire team trying to reach the Crystal Falls. We need the energy crystals there, but the Shadow Stalkers guard them too well. Marcus had heard about the Shadow Stalkers from Redstone during their journey to the city. Massive predators that hunted using natural camouflage. They were the apex predators of this world. Or so the Gricks thought. Then let me prove it, Marcus said. I'll get your crystals. The chamber went silent. Even the guards stopped their constant scanning of the screens to stare at him. White Crystal leaned forward. You volunteer to go to Crystal Falls, alone. Yes, Marcus smiled slightly. But first, I need information. Everything you know about the Shadow Stalkers, the territory around the falls, and any previous attempts to reach the crystals. The council spoke among themselves in their clicking language before White Crystal raised a hand. Show him, he commanded. The screens changed to show footage of previous expeditions. Marcus watched carefully as heavily armed Grick warriors moved through the forest. They relied entirely on their technology, motion sensors, energy shields, and powerful weapons. When the Shadow Stalkers attacked, it was always the same story. The creatures disrupted their technology somehow, turned their numbers against them, and picked them off one by one. Your warriors are brave, Marcus said finally, but they move like prey. They depend too much on their tools. Against a true hunter, that's fatal. And you think you can do better? Blue River's tone was challenging. With just your primitive weapons. Marcus patted his survival knife. This knife has kept humans alive for thousands of years. Sometimes the old ways are better. How long until sunrise? 6 hours, White Crystal answered. You want to go now? Best time to hunt is early morning, Marcus explained. I'll need a map to the Crystal Falls, and some rope if you have it. Nothing electronic, it'll just slow me down. The council chamber erupted in clicking sounds of protest and disbelief. Finally, White Crystal raised his hand for silence. If you succeed, you will have proven your words. If you fail, you will die. This is acceptable. Marcus nodded. One more thing. I want Redstone to wash from here. Someone needs to learn from this, whether I succeed or fail. White Crystal looked at Redstone, who had been standing quietly by the door. You will observe and record everything. As Marcus prepared to leave, Redstone approached him. The Shadow Stalkers. They are perfect hunters. No weaknesses. Marcus checked his knife one last time. Every predator has weaknesses. Sometimes it takes a predator to find them. He walked out of the chamber, leaving the bewildered council behind. It was time to show these aliens what a human hunter could really do. Marcus moved through the purple forest like a shadow, each step carefully placed. Dawn was breaking, painting the alien sky in shades of green and orange. He had been tracking the Shadow Stalkers for 2 hours, studying their patterns. The Gricks' footage hadn't done them justice. He crouched behind a fallen tree, examining fresh marks in the soil. The tracks were huge, easily twice the size of an earth tiger's, but it was their pattern that interested him. These creatures didn't move randomly. They patrolled their territory in precise routes. A deep rumbling sound came from ahead. Marcus stayed perfectly still as a Shadow Stalker passed nearby. Its body seemed to shift colors like oil on water, blending with the surroundings. But Marcus noticed how the morning dew on the leaves disappeared as it passed. The creature's camouflage generated heat. Through his binoculars, he could see crystal falls in the distance. The waterfalls sparkled with the energy crystals the Gricks needed, but 3 Shadow Stalkers guarded the approach. Back in the city, he knew Redstone and the council were watching through long-range cameras, probably expecting him to fail like all the others. Marcus smiled. Time to show them how humans hunt. He moved to a clearing and did something that would have horrified the Gricks. He deliberately stepped on a dry branch. The crack echoed through the forest. Immediately, two shadow stalkers turned toward the sound. Marcus was already moving, quick but quiet, to his chosen position. The creatures followed his trail, their massive forms rippling with color changes. They were smart, moving to flank his position, but Marcus had counted on this. He took out 3 small pouches he prepared using local materials, dried sap mixed with pungent berries he'd found. The first pouch he threw far to his left. When it burst, the scent caught the attention of one shadow stalker. The second pouch went right, drawing the other creature. The ancient human tactic of divide and conquer worked just as well on this alien world. Marcus focused on the closer shadow stalker. Its camouflage was good, but he could track it by the way it disturbed the forest. Bent leaves, shifted stones, disappeared dew. He waited until it was in the perfect position, then threw his last pouch directly at its face. The creature roared in confusion as the sticky sap and strong-smelling berries covered its sensory organs. Its camouflage flickered, revealing its true form, a massive lizard-like body with multiple legs and a long, spiked tail. Marcus didn't waste the opportunity. He sprinted past the disoriented creature, heading straight for Crystal Falls. The third shadow stalker guarding the falls rushed to intercept him. But Marcus had studied their hunting patterns. They always attacked from behind or the sides, never head-on. He ran straight at it, something no prey would do. The creature hesitated for a crucial second, its hunting instincts confused by this strange behavior. Marcus rolled under its striking tail and reached the falls. The crystal formations were within arm's reach. Behind him, he could hear all 3 shadow stalkers approaching, their frustrated roars shaking the ground. But they wouldn't attack immediately. Pack hunters always took time to regroup and coordinate. That gave him just enough time. Marcus quickly broke off several crystal clusters and stored them in his pack. Then he did something else that would shock the Gricks. He turned to face the shadow stalkers directly. The 3 creatures spread out before him, their bodies shifting colors in mesmerizing patterns. They were used to prey that ran, that hid, that depended on technology. Instead, Marcus drew his knife and took a hunter's stance. "Let's see who the real apex predator is," he said quietly, as the shadow stalkers charged. The Grick healing chamber was silent except for the soft hum of medical equipment. Marcus sat on an examination table while a medical technician treated the claw marks on his arm. 3 similar marks on his chest had already been sealed with advanced healing gel. On a nearby table lay his trophy, a finger-long fang from one of the shadow stalkers. "You fought them," Redstone said, his multiple eyes fixed on the fang. "No one fights shadow stalkers in lives. Yet you killed one." "Didn't want to kill it," Marcus replied, wincing as the gel was applied. "But when the big one got too close, I didn't have a choice." The knife found a weak spot under its jaw. After that, the others backed off. Predators usually do when they lose one of their own. The council chamber had erupted in chaos when Marcus walked back through the city gates, carrying both the crystals and his trophy. Now, 2 days later, the Gricks were still trying to understand what they had witnessed. White crystal entered the healing chamber, armor plates clicking softly. "The council has reviewed the recording of your hunt many times. We do not understand. You used no energy shields, no motion sensors, no plasma weapons. How did you survive?" Marcus stood up, testing his healed wounds. "You want me to teach you?" "Yes," White Crystal said. "Our warriors are strong. Our weapons are powerful, but we cannot survive in our own world without walls and shields. This must change." Over the next few hours, Marcus set up a training area in one of the city's lower levels. A group of 20 Grick warriors watched as he demonstrated basic tracking techniques, using marks he made on the floor. "First lesson," he said, pointing to the marks. "Technology is a tool, not a crutch. Your ancestors survived on this world before they had energy shields. Those instincts are still in you, just sleeping. He showed them how to move silently, how to read the environment, how to think like a predator instead of prey. The Gricks were quick learners once they understood the concepts. Shadow stalkers use heat to power their camouflage, Marcus explained, drawing diagrams. That's why you can track them by looking for disappeared dew. Every ability has a cost. Every predator has a pattern. Nature doesn't waste energy. Red Stone, who had appointed himself Marcus's main student, asked, "But how did you know to run straight at them?" "All our battle data shows this is suicide." Marcus smiled. "Because I watched them hunt. Ambush predators expect prey to run away. It triggers their chase instinct. When prey runs toward them instead, it breaks their pattern, makes them hesitate. Sometimes the best defense is to be unpredictable." As the training continued, Marcus learned from the Gricks too. They taught him about their world's complex ecosystem, their technology, and their history. He discovered that their species had developed tools very early, skipping many of the evolutionary steps that had shaped humanity's predator instincts. "Your people built walls before they learned to hunt," Marcus said to White Crystal during an evening meal. "Humans had to become hunters before we could be builders. Different paths, same destination." White Crystal's armor plates shifted in what Marcus now recognized as thoughtful movement. "Perhaps this is why you can teach us what we have forgotten. You carry your ancestors' memories in your instincts." Marcus watched the Grick warriors practicing their new skills, moving with growing confidence. Humans have a saying. Sometimes you have to look backward to move forward. Your people have incredible technology, but technology can fail. The skills I'm teaching you never will. Little did any of them know how soon those skills would be tested. The warning sirens echoed through the Grick city, their wail mixing with the sound of failing machinery. Marcus stood at the command center with White Crystal and Red Stone, watching as section after section of the city's power grid went dark. The massive energy shields protecting the city flickered dangerously. "Main crystal reactor is failing," a technician reported, his armor plates clicking in distress. "Backup systems are not responding. Shield collapse in 1 hour." White Crystal turned his multiple eyes to the external cameras. The timing couldn't be worse. The Great Migration approaches. Marcus looked at the screens. Hundreds of creatures were moving through the death zones toward the city. Not just shadow stalkers, but every major predator species on NK-427. The planet's complex orbital mechanics meant this mass migration happened once every cycle, and the city's shields had always protected them before. "How long until they reach the city?" Marcus asked. 2 hours, Red Stone answered. "But without shields." He left the sentence unfinished. Marcus watched his trained warriors gathering in the lower levels. For 3 weeks, he had taught them to think like hunters, to trust their instincts as much as their technology. Now they would have to prove themselves. "We can't evacuate," White Crystal said. "The other cities are too far, and the migrants would catch us in the open. We have never fought them directly, not in such numbers." Marcus walked to the tactical display. "Then we don't fight them directly. We use what we've learned." He turned to Red Stone. "Get me every hunter we've trained, and I need maps of the valleys leading to the city." An hour later, Marcus stood before 200 Grick warriors. Their armor was stripped of all non-essential technology, making them lighter and quieter. Each carried traditional weapons alongside their advanced ones. "The migrants follow the easiest paths," Marcus explained, pointing to the map. "There are 3 main valleys leading to the city. We're going to change those paths." He divided them into teams, each with a specific task. Some groups went to set up barriers of fallen trees and rocks, redirecting the migration's flow. Others prepared hunting pits covered with local vegetation. The most skilled warriors, led by Red Stone, took up positions at key choke points. "Remember your training," Marcus told them. "Use the terrain. Stay downwind. Work together. You're not prey anymore. You're hunters defending your territory." The shields failed just as the first migrants appeared. But instead of finding an easy path to the city, they encountered a maze of obstacles and traps. When they tried to force their way through, they met organized resistance from warriors who knew how to fight like predators themselves. Marcus coordinated from high ground. Using hand signals and bird calls, he taught his teams. He watched as shadow stalkers fell into carefully prepared pits, as larger creatures were steered away from the city by strategic placement of scent markers, as his warriors worked in perfect coordination to protect their home. A massive creature, larger than any they'd seen before, broke through one of the defensive lines. Marcus grabbed his knife and rifle, ready to join the fight personally. But before he could move, Redstone's team emerged from hidden positions, using the tactics they'd learned to drive the beast back. "Your warriors learned fast," Marcus said to White Crystal, who had insisted on staying at the command post. "They remember who they were meant to be," White Crystal replied. "Before walls, before shields, when we were also hunters." The battle continued through the night, but the city held. The migration, finding the path too costly, began to turn away toward easier routes. As dawn broke, Marcus watched his warriors emerging from their positions, tired but proud. They had faced their world's greatest dangers without shields or walls, and they had won. "The city's power will be restored soon," White Crystal said, "but I don't think we will hide behind shields as much as before." Marcus nodded, watching the sunrise. Sometimes you have to lose your technology to find your strength. 3 months after the Great Migration, Marcus stood at the edge of the Greek city, watching a hunting party return. They moved with quiet confidence through the purple forest, carrying their kills and gathered resources. No energy shields surrounded them, though they still carried advanced weapons alongside traditional tools. The warriors had found their balance between old and new ways. The city itself had changed. While the shield generators had been repaired, they were now used sparingly, mainly during severe storms. Guard towers had been replaced with hunting blinds, and the once sealed lower levels had been converted into training grounds where young Greeks learned to track, hunt, and survive. "The Earth Force ship will arrive tomorrow," Redstone said, walking up beside Marcus. His armor was scratched from recent hunts, worn like badges of honor rather than covered with energy shielding. "Will you return with them?" Marcus watched a group of Greek children practicing with small spears, their armor plates clicking with excitement as they learned to move silently. "Earth needs to know about your people. This could be the beginning of something important." White Crystal approached them, accompanied by the council members. They no longer stayed in their sealed chamber, but regularly joined hunting parties themselves. "We have prepared a proposal for your leaders," White Crystal said. "An alliance between our peoples. We have much to offer each other." Marcus nodded, thinking of the advanced technology the Greeks could share with Earth. But he knew the real value went deeper than that. "Both our species chose different paths," he said. "Humans kept our hunter instincts while developing technology. Your people chose technology first and lost touch with their instincts. Together, we can have the best of both worlds." The council had declared Marcus World Walker, a new title created specifically for him. In Greek tradition, it meant one who could move between the civilized and wild worlds, understanding both. Already, other Greek cities were requesting human teachers for their warriors. "The shadow stalkers still rule the deep forests," Blue River noted, pointing to the distant territories. "But now we can walk there too. My hunting party tracked one for 3 days last week. We didn't need to kill it. Just showing we could follow it was enough to mark our territory." Marcus smiled, remembering his first encounter with the shadow stalkers. The best predators don't need to fight. Just knowing how is usually enough. A group of warriors approached, led by a female Greek named Swift Current. She had been one of his best students. "The northern trading route is secure," she reported. "We found better paths through the death zones, ones that let us avoid most predator territories. The traders can move twice as fast now." This was perhaps Marcus's proudest achievement. The Greeks weren't just defending their cities anymore. They were expanding their safe zones, establishing trade routes, and learning to truly live in their world rather than hide from it. Later that evening, at a feast celebrating the upcoming alliance, White Crystal made a speech. 3 months ago, we were prisoners in our own world, hiding behind walls of energy and light. A human showed us that true strength comes not from running from our fears, but from understanding them, from remembering who we were to become who we could be. Marcus looked around the feast hall. Warriors wore their battle scars proudly. Young Gricks listened to hunting stories from their elders. Maps of the death zones showed newly marked trails and territories. A shadow stalker fang, his original trophy, had been mounted as a symbol of the new way. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Marcus said, standing to speak. But that's not something to fear. Humans learned that danger makes you stronger if you face it right. The Gricks have learned this too. Together, there's no world too dangerous for us to explore. As the feast continued, Marcus watched the 3 moons rise through the windows. The forests that had once been the death zones now held not just danger, but opportunity. Human and Grick would face it together, as the apex predators they were meant to be.